Welcome everyone, today we're talking Resto Druids, one of the strongest Mythic Plus healers from BFA, returning with a vengeance in Shadowlands. In this video, I'll be going over spells, talents, covenants, legendaries, and how all these changes affect the strength and viability of Resto Druids in both Mythic Plus and in Raid. Timestamps are in the description below if there's a specific topic you're interested in. First, let's take a look at spells. Resto Druids now get Stampeding Roar, Cyclone, and Nature Swiftness baseline. This is a massive amount of utility for a healer that already has some of the strongest utility in the game. Several spells received minor changes in the form of number tweaks or mana cost, but two spells in particular got large reworks that significantly affect how they're used. Swiftmend now consumes a heal over time effect when cast, so understanding damage patterns and pre-hotting a target prior to incoming damage is critical when using this spell. Also, Ironbark's cooldown has been increased from 60 to 90 seconds, but while active, your heal over time effects do 20% more healing to the target. Although it's never fun to get nerfed, it's nice to see a small buff to soften the blow. Another big change is Innervate, where the caster receives 50% of the benefit if they choose to innervate another player. This introduces a trade-off where you can provide more overall benefit to the raid, but at the expense of your own mana pool. Obviously, this is a somewhat controversial change within the community, but I hope it doesn't prove to be too big of an issue for raid groups. Next up is talents. In the level 15 row, Nourish has replaced Prosperity. In a Mythic Plus environment, I think Cenarion Ward will still be the play most of the time. Cenarion Ward is an incredibly versatile, on-demand hot that synergizes well with the Harmony Mastery effect. Regrowth and Nourish seem to mostly cover the same use case. Maybe as mastery levels increase over time, Nourish might become useful for heavy spot healing situations with its triple Harmony buff. But for now, I plan to stick with Cenarion Ward in this row. In the level 45 talent row, each affinity has been modified. Balance Affinity now grants you Typhoon and Starfire, and the DPS rotation is affected by Balance's Eclipse mechanic. I think Balance will give Feral a run for its money as the go-to DPS affinity for keys. Balance gets a lot more enticing when you consider it also comes with Typhoon. Feral Affinity picked up Maim, and Guardian Affinity picked up Incapacitating Roar. It's interesting to see each affinity now has a crowd control ability on top of the crowd control ability you'll be able to pick up from level 35 talent row. Speaking of which, the level 35 talent row is mostly the same, except Heart of the Wild has replaced Typhoon. This is a very interesting talent that could potentially pump some insane DPS. Its duration and cooldown perfectly line up with Bloodlust, and I anticipate the highest dungeon runs at the end of the season will be completed using this talent. The last talent change is the removal of Stonebark and the addition of Overgrowth in the level 90 talent row. Although I think Spring Blossoms is the overall better pick long term, Overgrowth will be a solid talent early on in the tier to cover some of the tank healing gaps from lack of gear. Inner Peace will be perfectly viable for a raid environment if the reduced cooldown on Tranquility is required. Next, let's talk Covenants. But before we do, if you're enjoying this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming guides. In Shadowlands, your character gets to pick one Covenant, which unlocks a generic Covenant ability and a class-specific Covenant ability. Covenants are still being tuned weekly, so the numerically optimal Covenant for a specific spec and specific content type could change dramatically between now and release. For that reason, I'm not going to rank these in terms of numerical power, but instead give you my thoughts on each Covenant ability and discuss the general feeling within the community regarding which Covenant is best for Resto. Keep in mind, if you play multiple specs across dungeons, raid, and PvP, you might want to research those specs as well, since you can't change your Covenant when swapping specs. First up is the Kyrian Covenant. Their generic ability is Summon Steward, which allows you to get 3 charges of a 20% health vial that also clears some negative debuffs. As this potion doesn't share a cooldown with health potions or health stones, this is one of the strongest Covenant generic abilities. The Kyrian class ability is Kindred Spirits, which allows you to create a bond with another player and gain benefits according to your roles. This mostly boils down to a single target healing buff that also benefits one of your allies. Kindred Spirits doesn't appear to be that great for Resto in its current form, but we'll have to see if it gets any changes prior to release. Next we have the Necrolords. The generic Necrolord ability is Fleshcraft, which gives you a 20% shield after channeling for 4 seconds. Fleshcraft has the added benefit of giving you buffs if you channel it near corpses. I put a lot of time into testing this ability in dungeons, and not only does it feel clunky, but you're going to be spending over a minute channeling in each dungeon. Now, there is a soulbind that allows you to channel while moving, but overall, Fleshcraft just doesn't feel like it's worth the cost. The Necrolord class ability is Adaptive Swarm, which has a lot of promise and seems like it could be a decent choice for both Mythic Plus and Raid. You get a lot of value out of the first target you select, and it's awesome that it works with Harmony, but the subsequent jumps are random and generally much less valuable. I think there's a decent chance this ability gets a slight rework before launch, but for now, I'd categorize it as decent. Next is Venthyr. the generic ability Door of Shadows is a 35-yard teleport with a 1.5-second cast time. I think this ability is amazing for classes with low mobility, but mobility's never been a weakness of the Druid. A solid ability for sure, but I personally wouldn't factor it in too much when making my Covenant choice. The Venthyr class ability is Ravenous Frenzy, which, for me, was actually a bit of a stressful ability to use. I genuinely felt anxious when popping this ability, worried that I might not cast fast enough and end up stunned. I think this ability can be very strong if timed well, but with a cooldown of 3 minutes, I'm not sure how valuable it's going to be unless paired with abilities like Tree or Bloodlust. Last, but certainly not least, is Night Fae. The generic Covenant ability is Soul Shape, a 90-second cooldown that upon activation blinks you forward 15 yards and transforms you into a little fox. This is a great ability to get out of danger since it instantly teleports you, and you're able to activate the blink multiple times during the 12-second spell duration. I would rank this ability above Venthyr's Door of Shadows, specifically for Druids, because it instantly gets you out of danger. The Night Fae class ability is Convoke the Spirits, a highly anticipated ability that is fun, powerful, and flexible. This ability recently got nerfed from 16 spells to 12 spells, which levels the playing field a bit more compared to some of the other Covenant picks. One downside to Convoke the Spirits is the spells are random. We know they're supposed to be affected by your current specialization, but nobody knows for sure exactly how the spell selection works, or if you're at least guaranteed to get a certain number of healing or damage spells. I expect the majority of Resto Druids will pick Night Fae when Shadowlands is released, but unpopular opinion here, I think there's a good chance we'll see another Covenant rise to the top for Resto Druids before the first season is over. Next, let's talk Legendaries. At the start of Shadowlands, you'll be allowed to equip one legendary item. Unlike Legion, you'll be able to target the legendary you want to craft, instead of relying on RNG loot drops, which is a huge win. Each class has a set of general legendaries, as well as spec-specific legendaries to choose from. I'm going to list all legendaries available to the Resto Druid and give you my thoughts on each one. The class-wide legendaries are Circle of Life and Death, Drought of Deep Focus, Lycera's Fleeting Glimpse, and Oath of the Elder Druid. The Resto-specific legendaries are Memory of the Mother Tree, the Dark Titan's Lesson, Verdant Infusion, and Vision of Unending Growth. Drought of Deep Focus and Oath of the Elder Druid seem to me to be the weakest of all the legendaries, so I don't plan to discuss them here. Visions of Unending Growth and Memory of the Mother Tree look like strong contenders for raid, while Lycera's Fleeting Glimpse, the Dark Titan's Lesson, and Verdant Infusion appear to be strongest in Mythic Plus. I think Circle of Life and Death is a solid pick for both content, and potentially a great choice for your first legendary if you plan to do raiding and Mythic Plus. Vision of Unending Growth gives each tick of Rejuve a chance to cast another Rejuve on a nearby target. While 2% might seem a bit low, each Rejuve tick has a chance to trigger this effect. At 5% haste, a Rejuve ticks 7 times, meaning for each Rejuve you cast, there's a 13% chance that you create at least one more Rejuve. I think this might be incredibly strong in raid, and will really benefit players who can find ways to keep a large number of Rejuves active. Memory of the Mother Tree also appears to be a strong throughput legendary for raid. With the mana efficiency of Wild Growth, keeping the spell on cooldown and capitalizing on extra hots will be very mana efficient for progression raiding. For Mythic Plus, Verdant Infusion is shaping up to be a nice overall pick, especially early in the tier. Tank healing is generally harder early on, so being able to extend all hots with a Swiftman will be very powerful, especially with Overgrowth. The main drawback to this legendary is it only affects one player and adds no damage, but healer damage probably won't be a major focus early on in the expansion. The Dark Titan's Lesson is also another solid pick for Mythic Plus, especially since it allows you to double dip on photosynthesis. Maintaining 2 life blooms will eat up more globals and require more planing, but could be strong on weeks requiring heavy healing. The last legendary in the Mythic Plus category is a bit of a wild card, but has huge potential. Lycera's Fleeting Glimpse casts a spell every 45 seconds based on your current form. Assuming there's a way to track this internal cooldown via weak aura, this could be an incredibly flexible legendary, where every 45 seconds you get to choose if you want more healing, more damage, or more damage reduction, all depending on the situation. I'm excited to see how this one shapes up as the season progresses, and wouldn't be surprised in the least if the Starfall effect turns out to be a huge DPS boost if timed correctly. Now that we've gone through all the spells, talents, covenants, and legendaries, let's dive into how the Resto Druid is shaping up in Shadowlands. First off, Resto Druid has been the king of Mythic Plus for some time, and it doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon. With the removal of Engineering Battle Res, groups without Death Knights or Warlocks will be even more likely to want a Resto Druid. With Balance Affinity being a viable alternative to Feral, Resto Druids can safely DPS from range while also having the option to run triple crowd control abilities, Typhoon, Cyclone, and Mass Entangle. As an added utility bonus, Stampeding Roar can trim a lot of time off the clock, and Nature's Swiftness makes casting critical spells a lot easier on the move. As far as rating is concerned, Resto Druids haven't always brought the most utility. Their lack of passive DPS and damage reduction hurts their overall value compared to Holy Paladins and Discipline Priests. However, the addition of Stampeding Roar is a very potent raid cooldown and will add some much needed utility to the raid group. Additionally, Resto Druids are typically very strong at the beginning of an expansion when health pools are hard to top off, allowing their HOTS to provide a lot of value. Overall, I think Resto Druids are in an even better spot than they were in BFA and will continue being incredibly strong in Mythic Plus. While it might be a little rough at the very start of the season with low haste and mastery, it won't take long for Resto to hit its stride and start pushing some high keys. But what do you guys think? Will you be trying out the Resto Druid in Shadowlands? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments below or catch me when I'm streaming on Twitch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.